Hello, everybody. I hope everyone's having a wonderful day this beautiful sunny Thursday. And what I want to talk about today is fixed fights in the UFC. It's been a topic that there really isn't a lot of information on out there, but I've researched a lot, and I'll have to say I do believe that some of these fights are being fixed in the UFC. Now, I don't think every fight is being fixed in the UFC, but I think some of these high mega dollar fights definitely are. I'll speak to a couple. If you look on YouTube, there's some videos out there of Luke Rockhold fighting Vitor Belfort. If you'll notice in that, in these videos, that before the end of the fight, when Vitor hits Luke with a devastating kick to end the fight, Luke very unnoticeably, but noticeably enough, nods his head. When he nods his head, the kick is thrown, and then the fight is over. That's not the only fight that I've noticed this in. One of the big people I've noticed this in is the fights of Conor McGregor. I used to be a huge McGregor fan. I bought into a lot of the hype. And to be honest, that bandwagon fell off really when he stayed out of MMA for such a long period of time. And the whole Floyd Mayweather episode, and then you have the whole him when he come back Khabib. And I really didn't like the way that he approached either of these fights. He used to be kind of comical and funny, but this stuff was just really mean and dark-spirited and just kind of ugly, and really didn't give a good look to McGregor. It made him look like just kind of a wicked dude, to be quite honest. As I watched that Khabib and Conor fight, right before the end of the fight, in the fourth round there, Conor nods his head at Khabib, and then Khabib makes that final takedown and ends the fight. I looked back at some of Conor's other fights, and that's not the only time I've seen him nod. There was also a episode in the Mendes fight where at the very beginning of the fight, where Mendes is in the getting the instructions from the referee, and Mendes winks at McGregor before they touch gloves. I found that very odd. And again, before the last sequence in the fight, Conor nods his head at Mendes, and then the whole last exchange happens, and the fight ends with Mendes getting KO'd. Now, I've been looking at a lot of these fights and what's up with all these nods. Why there's a nod and then there's a fight ending sequence. It seems very describable. I mean, very plain to me to describe that these fights are being fixed, and that nod is the cue for that fight to go ahead and finish the sequence or finish the script. If you look back at the Maymack fight, when Floyd's in the corner, the referee comes over and taps him on the leg so many times, telling him pretty much how many rounds were left in the fight. I believe that fight was completely scripted, and there is even some news that was out there that a promoter came forward and said the fight was scripted, and then mysteriously was murdered. I believe it was Washington that he was murdered in, but the guy was soon after murdered under very suspect circumstances. I do believe that, like major money guys like McGregor, these fights are being fixed. It's impossible in MMA to control the narrative 100% of the time. The only way to be able to do that is to script these fights. When I looked at the Aldo fight before Aldo ever got in there with McGregor, he looked like something was off. He was looking down at his feet. He wouldn't even look at McGregor, and he seemed very ashamed at the end of the fight. Now, maybe he was just ashamed that he got beaten so quickly and so badly. Or maybe he was ashamed because he was forced to throw that fight. He was back in the corner, which would not necessarily be a bad thing for him, because if he got a payday, if you notice, soon after McGregor left the division, and Aldo was able to reclaim that title. Same thing with Luke Rockhold. We see Luke lose to Vitor, and just, a few fights later, he's in the mix, and he's winning a middleweight title. I do believe some of these fights are definitely being fixed, and because if you notice, the people that are losing, it's not necessarily hurting them very bad. There could also be payoffs that they're not coming forth with behind the scenes. We'll never know. But just as much as boxing has been fixed in the past, I believe now that MMA fights are as well. I believe that the first McGregor-Diaz fight was fixed. I think Conor threw that fight because just look at what came from the revenue from the second fight. They went up from being like the second or third highest gate up to being the first highest gate on the McGregor-Diaz 2 fight. So also, when I saw that nod in the Khabib fight and McGregor losing, I believe that he took a dive again, because what does it do? Again, it sets up a much more higher revenue rematch. I think that the UFC has come to the point that it's not about the best fighting the best, not about the ranking. It's about just generating mass sums of money. And in order to do that, fights are being scripted and people are taking dives. Do I think that every fight in the UFC is a dive or a scripted fight? No. Like I said, just against some of the mega money fights where they need a certain person like McGregor to stay on top or to lose in a certain circumstance in order to bring in a lot more eyes and a lot more money. That's about all I got for this video. If you have any comments on this topic about fights being fixed in the UFC or even in boxing, feel free to comment. I'd like to hear what you got to say, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day. God bless.